What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another exciting episode of CollectCo Connection, your one and only AR podcast. Today, we have the pleasure of welcoming Matt Allison, a seasoned trade credit professional from Allianz Trade, an international insurance enterprise that monitors financial health of over 80 million companies in providing trade credit insurance, business fraud insurance, and so much more. After starting his career in corporate America with leading CPG companies, where he managed both distribution and financial performance across the Midwest, Matt transitioned for a role with Thomas Reuters in the accounting industry, which turned into the stepping stones of his success with Allianz Trade. My man, Matt, welcome to the show.
Hey, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course, man. Quick little fun story for those of you that network on LinkedIn. I think one of the coolest things about having Matt on this show today is we both network far beyond surface level. I met Matt on LinkedIn. We've been great friends ever since, consistently meeting and communicating with each other. And I think that it really just shows the power that networking and LinkedIn in general has to growing a business enterprise. So cool fun fact there. And Matt, super appreciate you being on, man.
Hey, completely agree with that statement because truly people are people and it's the best way to connect with similar minded folks. Funny how we can just talk the talk from connecting on there. So definitely appreciate that.
That's right, man. So always like to just kind of start off with a little bit of background. Can you share with the listeners, like, how did you get started in the financial services sector? What were kind of the building blocks that led you into the success with Allianz Trade?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. So growing up, I was always a super analytical individual, but I also thrived in like a social setting. So really took on sales, as mentioned, various CPG companies, but still had a fine note on the financial side of it as well. Then moved back to Michigan after my home state, after living in different states, worked with Thomson Reuters, getting my MBA. And really, this opportunity came across from the company. And I thought, what a great opportunity to really promote something that honestly companies need to know exists and the value it does present. So relative to this current role, I really do enjoy educating individuals and just seeing if it makes sense. At least they know that this is an option in their toolkit they could utilize,
Yeah.
which is a great, exciting opportunity. So
No, absolutely. I love it, man. It sounds like you've been across the US. You've kind of dabbled in different explorations in the financial sector, and lo and behold, you landed in such a sweet spot that I'm excited to actually dive a little bit deeper into. So, for any of our listeners, and to be fair, myself included, who might be unfamiliar with what trade credit insurance is, what is trade credit insurance, and how does the functions in international trade, like, can you just walk us through a high level overview of what we're talking about here?
yeah, that's always the question I tell my friends. They're like, I still don't understand what you do. So it's kind of a great tool because essentially, if you think about it, from every business is going to sell them their business on credit terms, net 30, net 60, things along those lines. When you do that, you're going to have to go through some level of risk through via a credit check, credit application along those lines. But there's still levels of risk. You have controls of every part of your business, except for until you send that AR out. Once you deliver a product, if somebody doesn't pay you, you have no repercussions. So essentially what we do with trade credit insurance, it comes down to four simple, what we call pillars.
Hmm.
It's safe sales expansion. So essentially you can sell more without credit concerns because we're going to guarantee that valuable AR so you're not left out. Catastrophic loss protection. Think about the recent bankruptcies that happened. We're at the highest level of bankruptcy since COVID. Think about that. And also think about what's going on in the economy right now as well, both domestically and globally. Do we know what's going to happen next year?
Right.
I mean, bankruptcies continue to rise as our economy reshuffles. And then it really comes back from credit monitoring. As you mentioned, we
Mm.
monitor the financials of over 80 million companies globally. So what we do, we give that data that goes above and beyond simply just credit reports.
Hmm.
We give that to our policyholders so they know they have someone doing that for them and assisting them to give them time back in their day. It's a pretty complex tool, as anybody in the credit management world knows. What we do is we help them make more efficient credit decisions and help them navigate the risk. If you're like unleery about one potential customer, or there's someone that wants larger credit terms, it's a tool that really pays for itself, to be honest with you, and helps you expand
Yeah.
customer relationships.
It's a proactive tool. I mean, a lot of people are trying to address the delinquency or the non-payment after the fact that it's already happened, but this is kind of a security blanket for those that are playing in that global demographic to protect themselves up front, right?
100%. They commonly teach a bad debt reserve, which is a gap accounting principle. But at the same standpoint, when you pay for a trade credit insurance policy, you have one set fee you pay for the service. You have real-time credit monitoring. You don't have to worry about bad debt because we're going to take care of it for you.
Right.
And ultimately, you have sense of security at the same standpoint. Also, one of the things important is if working capital is important for you to navigate uncertainty.
Yeah.
When your AR is secured, you have a lot more flexibility to navigate through lots of trials and tribulations.
Got it.
I thoroughly encourage people to talk to their banker about how that relates. Super important to note.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, maybe just drilling in a bit more. Obviously, there's a slew of companies that are operating globally, but just from your experience or what you see day to day, are there any like key sectors or industries where you're going, look, almost every time if you're dealing offshore, you need to consider something like trade credit?
Yeah, definitely the manufacturing space,
Mm,
100%. So the biggest thing with the manufacturing industry is relationships are super critical. Someone's been doing business with another business partner for 20 years. That relationship is vital. What's important to think about with that is what repercussions do you have if they ever face a financial hardfall or something along those lines, or if they pay you late, they pay you 10 days late.
yeah,
That's a free loan. So ultimately, that's a big thing. Also in the business services space too, because if you look at staffing, something along those lines, if somebody pays you late, your number one asset is your AR. So, last but not least, if you export to a different country,
mm,
there's risk on a country level, then there's risk on the company level as well. So, working with us, that risk is completely our problem. It's no longer the problem for the company. So, you don't have to have any deposits or things like that because we're going to actually guarantee that AR and the
got it.
credit process we give for our clients.
Man, it really is interesting. Earlier when we were talking, you had mentioned like the global economy, even the financial economy, political economy, if you're talking about the United States right now, like just from what you're seeing, do those kind of factors and the well-being of any region financially or fiscally, like do they play into the necessity or the need to have credit trade insurance?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, just look at the global trade challenges. We actually anticipate a 9% insolvency increase globally in the
Okay.
manufacturing space in
Oh,
Europe.
wow.
So once again, it's a totally separate set of rules in a different country.
Yeah.
So what's the standard protocol there? And of course, if you don't live in that state or you don't live in that country, how do you really know what's going on a local level? And if something happens from a bankruptcy or something along those lines, how are you going to have any repercussions outside of just being pro upfront by reducing sales potential, unless you have us to really handle that for you?
Yeah. It sounds like there's multiple different variables that are playing into whether it's what's happening locally, what's happening offshore, regionally, and then it's certainly just the financial economics of the business deal in itself. It sounds like a pretty big bag of tricks that you guys need to consider for protection.
I remember the term "keep it simple, stupid." The
Yeah.
kiss we learn as kids. Not to be derogatory, but there's so many factors that contribute towards credit management, and it's
Yeah.
an incredibly difficult job. Having somebody to partner with that process to eliminate the guesswork of lack of information, any potential financial challenges, that's really where we come in to help basically companies maximize their revenue because you're missing revenue by not looking at this.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And I mean, look, even from my standpoint, I'm working in the delinquent AR side. And so one of the biggest challenges that we see is that most of the creditors are not really doing an incredible job of due diligence or qualification before they're putting pen to paper on a new business deal. So just with respect to like, obviously trade credit insurance, but diving deeper into what kind of protocols or steps you would recommend for due diligence, particularly of an offshore or a global outfit you're going to do a partnership with, like what advice would you give to some of the creditors out there or things they should be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So, really, if you don't have any type of guarantees relative to any commitment you make, so if you ship, let's say, $1 million of product that you send over to a different country, what type of guarantees do you have to backstop any potential repercussions that happen outside of a company? We call them ghost companies. They just disappear.
Yeah.
Um, Also know the rules and regulations of that particular country. Every country has different collection rules. Some countries
Mm-hmm.
it takes 6 months to get paid after a bankruptcy. 6 months. Imagine being $1 million just sitting out there in AR
We
for
don't
six
have that kind
months.
of time. Yeah.
So just knowing the rules of the road of different countries, and having some level of essentially like protection is important. And as noted, relative to where we come into play, if you require a deposit up front, that could limit some sales sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to companies that want to sell to Korea. It just happened recently. They required a 50% deposit, and that company says, no way.
Yeah.
They just have the cash at the time. So it's like, well, let's have a conversation. We can tell you how they look financially, see if it makes sense or not. So, if we're not a partner or not, just make sure you have some level of security that maximizes your sales and potential bad debt.
Yeah, no, I mean, and you mentioned it earlier, everything from like a credit history search, taking a peek at the assets, looking at the financial economy of where their headquarters is, all of those kind of acute details, going back to your phrase, your non-derogatory phrase, simple, stupid, it really is a large bag of different subjective variables that you need to consider when you're jumping into an arrangement like that. Like, one of the things I've experienced is there's a lot of creditors who are finding it difficult just to get the personal guarantor signed on a business to business agreement. I mean, forget an upfront deposit, just an individual from a company making themselves liable if anything falls short. So, like, would you say that trade credit insurance is a better proactive step than like a personal guarantor? Do they kind of work together or what? I mean, what are the guidelines around that?
Yeah, so I appreciate that question. So think about how often sales, maybe anybody in a sales profession has noted, credit has gotten in the way that would limit sales potential that you have. Let's say you have a $10,000 potential sale and the credit department comes back saying, "Hey, that's too large of a revenue that we can extend. We're
Yeah.
overextended. We need some level of guarantee, like a personal guarantee to that point, or we need shorter credit terms, things like
Mm-hmm.
that." So, and once again, with the whole trade credit world, we can alleviate all that challenge. So it's really just a matter of credit restrictions can limit relationships, can remove relationships, because you can grow the relationship by just selling more and making it so much more streamlined. Um, and I hate for people to think of it as, hey, I'm taking out an insurance policy against this company that I sell to.
Right.
It's the total opposite. You're just having financial flexibility and financial growth. So that's super, super critical.
Understood. Understood. I know we're getting short on time, but in one of your responses earlier, you had mentioned the landscape of bankruptcy, which I know is running rampant right now. Um, with respect to trade credit insurance, if you have a policy and one of your partners offshore or even inside of the States files for bankruptcy, what is the process from then on look like?
Yeah, so great question. Have you ever heard of preferential payments?
Yeah.
So, for those that don't know, if there's a company that files for bankruptcy and they pay AR within a particular set of time frame, let's say 90 days,
Hmm.
there's actually a repercussion where the lawyers can come back to claim those preferential payments as a part of the settlement. So, hey,
Oh,
this person paid me before the bankruptcy. I'm good. Are you though? Imagine
right.
having that money already spent, and they come after to chase that. So in the
Oh
world of a
man.
bankruptcy, the overall legal proceedings that take place in the navigation of that actual bankruptcy for someone that's never experienced it, it's a pretty long and lengthy process.
Yeah.
So our policyholders don't have to worry about those legal fees. It's included within the actual payment agreements. They don't have to
Oh
worry about the
man.
actual preferential payments.
Okay.
So essentially, you have a legal expert to navigate you through that actual bankruptcy process because it's never fun. Lots of uncertainty with that.
Right.
Um, and then you have all of your controls in place from a financial standpoint because no one can predict. No one wants to pay bankrupt. No one wants to file for bankruptcy. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
So they're not going to tell you, "Hey, I'm struggling. I'm thinking about bankruptcy." They're going to pay you
Meanwhile,
because
I'm trying
they
to
care about
land
the
this deal.
they care about you because they care about the relationship, and that's a potential repercussion. So the last thing I want to note with respect to time is with
Sure.
the real-time credit monitoring we provide, we're going to monitor the liquidity and overall sustainability of a business real time. So
Mm,
if we know that you're doing business with this customer, regardless of if they're paying their bills or not, if we see something taking place with best in class tools, not a credit report, 40 of those, NDAs,
yeah.
financial reporting, we're going to tell you, hey, FYI, you should update your credit terms with this company
Mm.
so you're not left $1 million in the hole, likely to get 40% of that in bankruptcy. So,
So you're like putting on essentially like a risk score prior
yep.
to the pen to paper and going, hey, look, if you're in the yellow range, these are recommended things that we would change. And then obviously, if you're in green, probably still worth it to interest trade credit insurance, even if they are sound, just for that protection.
Yeah, I'll tell you. So the customers, I would say roughly 90% of the customers that we insure against fall on a scale of 1 to 10, fall between the
Hmm.
numbers of 4 to 6.
Ah, okay.
So 10 would be a company that's no longer in business, and then a 1 would be like an Amazon or a Walmart.
Yeah, we feel pretty
Because
safe
obviously,
walking it.
yeah,
Yeah.
but something to consider, those companies have buying power,
Right.
much like any large major company. They have power to, if you don't accept their payment terms, they'll buy from somebody else, which is your competitor, and thus essentially they could pay you up 200 days late and no zero recourse.
And you got zero
So
control at that point. Yeah.
and that's where that working capital comes into play. Super
Okay.
critical. You don't want to say no to the business, but
Right. No, right. Especially for the whales that, and it sounds like in most cases, that's where the largest deficits occur is when you got an offshore relationship with a whale going in, it's mutually beneficial, and then the stick breaks and you're going, man, what do I do from here? So,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's they're going to pay. We know that, but when?
right. It's which path are we gonna take to find the
Yeah.
resolution at that point? So,
And once again, the challenge with credit management, 100%. So,
no, definitely.
um, so
Uh,
I go
Go
ahead.
for it.
I appreciate you spending the time. I think the one challenge that we have here is the awareness of trade credit, which I'm so happy that we've connected and you're a fan of the solution when it applies. I appreciate the time to talk a little bit more about it. It's pretty widely accepted in Europe. Been
Yeah.
around 130 years, and it's still growing rapidly here in North America as companies look to do more business.
No, certainly. I mean, just from my experience, I think there's a massive opportunity for US creditors to focus a little bit more, pay a little bit more attention to the benefits of being proactive instead of reactive. And I think that something like trade credit insurance fits so perfectly into that pocket that is really saving these larger companies like probably hundreds of millions in potential losses at the end of the year. So, Matt, my man, super appreciate you hopping on today. As I said to the listeners earlier, Matt and I go way back. Always exciting to catch a few moments with you and enlighten not only the listeners, but myself. I didn't know as much about trade credit insurance, so I super appreciate you popping on to talk shop with me, man.
Hey, I appreciate the time, man. I appreciate all of your listeners as well for the time.
And yeah, man, so I'll hit you offline, but for everybody listening, I'll go ahead and put the Allianz Trade contact information, Matt's information in the description box below, and we'll see you next time, brother. Appreciate you.
Thanks.